2 years ago, I first raised the need for building the conservative case for trans acceptance. Back then, I argued that the starting point of an intellectual conservatism should be to adapt effectively to new circumstances and demands, while insisting on preserving the good things in our basic social structure. And therefore, on trans issues, the conservatives should find and support proposals for change that will help integrate trans people into society as productive members with equal opportunities, while preserving our shared values and institutions. Today, I will expand on this argument and illustrate the work we need to do to bring this vision to life. Firstly, by conservative, I mean philosophical conservatism. That is, the canon of thinking that can be traced back to thinkers like Edmund Burke, rather than politically right-wing thinking, or what so-called conservative political parties are currently doing. Much of right-wing politics is reactionary rather than conservative, and this situation is frankly getting worse. On the other hand, moderate leaders of center-left parties sometimes adopt philosophically conservative stances too, at least on certain issues. So by conservative, I'm referring to the philosophical framework, not the political party or tribe. Conservatism as a philosophical standpoint is generally skeptical towards radical change based on abstract ideas. It is not opposed to all change, however, and thus is not reactionary. Rather, change is only justifiable on practical need, and any proposal for change also needs to be brought into line with the long-standing traditions of a given society. Moreover, change should be carefully considered and gradual, as opposed to emotionally charged and revolutionary. A conservative case for trans acceptance would therefore aim to bring about general acceptance and accommodation of trans people in society in a way consistent with the aforementioned principles. There are more reasons to support a conservative case for trans acceptance. Firstly, as I argued before, philosophical conservatism is an inherent component in a healthy and robust reformist philosophy, because otherwise there's basically no justification for choosing reform over revolution. Thus, the conservative case for trans acceptance is also a large part of any reformist case for trans acceptance. Secondly, one of the biggest goals of true conservative philosophy is to preserve freedom by preventing authoritarianism justified on abstract utopian goals. Therefore, the conservative case for trans acceptance also plays an important role in preventing cultural warriors on both the far left and the far right from using trans issues as a wedge to take away freedom. Having this framework in the first place opens up many possible areas of discussion that are excluded from the current public discussion around trans issues, which is dominated by the culture war between the radicals and the reactionaries. For example, we should have an honest discussion about how certain trans rights demands or models of accommodation for trans people do or do not conflict with long-standing social norms and values, and whether there is a way to resolve such conflicts if necessary. We will only get to good solutions for accommodating trans people as a society if we do this. Right now, the radicals insist that either there is never any conflict, or that any conflict must be entirely resolved in favor of the trans activist demands, because tradition is seen as oppressive anyway. On the other hand, the reactionaries insist that any accommodation of trans identities, even down to the use of preferred pronouns on a voluntary basis, is impossible to reconcile with traditional values, resorting not to robust intellectual argument, but to populist emotional appeal as the justification. A truly intellectual conservative position, based on the aforementioned philosophical framework, would reject both of these extremes and provide a more rational middle ground to have truly fruitful conversations on. Going forward in this series, I will be opening up all sorts of discussions basing my position upon the philosophical framework of the conservative case for trans acceptance. It is going to be a long and arduous process, especially in the current cultural war context, but it is certainly a process we need to have. Unlike the 100% with us or against us position of both the radicals and the reactionaries, in a truly conservative framework there is plenty of room to make distinctions and hammer out compromises. For example, we can aim to make it easier for trans people to live as their identified gender in many areas of life, while still recognizing the importance of biological sex in some contexts, and therefore justifiably making exceptions to trans women in such contexts. We can make it easier for adult trans people to access medical treatment to relieve their gender dysphoria, by improving insurance coverage in countries where healthcare is mostly privately provided, and shortening waiting lists in countries with public health care systems. while also insisting on much stricter protocols when it comes to minors, because we recognize the need to be particularly cautious when it comes to allowing teenagers to make irreversible decisions. All these positions have justifications that can be found in our long-standing values and norms that represent many generations of lived experience and wisdom, which radical activists unjustifiably deride as oppressive, while reactionaries selectively ignore in their biased posturing. Re-embracing such values and norms is what it means to be philosophically conservative, and what would provide us with a rational alternative to the extremism on both sides.